Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Dylan Thomas's elegy for his dying father, written in 1951, was cast in a form that Chaucer would have recognized 6 centuries earlier. As we have seen throughout this series of programs, every age has its new poetry, but there is always a continuity with the past as well. Poets speak in their own voices, but poets, like actors, are inevitably both part of the time they live in and also the inheritors of what has gone before. And that was very true of Dylan Thomas. From his teens right up to the time he died at the age of 39, his eloquent and sometimes difficult poems drew on a small but intense range of traditional themes: sex, birth, death, nostalgia for lost childhood. Many of Thomas's poems begin with the assumption or insistence that we start to die from the moment we are born, even, indeed, from the moment we are conceived. And this continual process of birth and death links us with everything else in the world. The death of a flower comes under the same edict and force as our own death, because the powers of destruction are the same. This is the whole burden of one of his best-known early poems, written when he was only 18.
The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age, that blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer. And I am dumb to tell the crooked rose my youth is bent by the same wintry fever. The force that drives the water through the rocks drives my red blood, that dries the mouthing streams, turns mine to wax, and I am dumb to mouth unto my veins how at the mountain spring the same mouth sucks. The hand that whirls the water in the pool, stirs the quicksand, that ropes the blowing wind, hauls my shroud sail, and I am dumb to tell the hanging man how of my clay is made the hangman's lime. The lips of time leach to the fountainhead, love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood shall calm her sores. And I am dumb to tell a weather's wind how time has ticked a heaven round the stars. And I am dumb to tell the lover's tomb how at my sheet goes the same crooked worm.
Dylan Thomas was a legend in his own lifetime and became an even more powerful legend after his death in 1953. But that legend mainly had to do with his personal behavior, not with his poems, which are almost without exception skilled and serious pieces of craftsmanship. He was a prodigy who began to burn out too early. He'd created much of his best work by the time he was 21. But towards the end of his life, he wrote this moving elegy for his dying father.
Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, stay, do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in the green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
Across the Atlantic, a very slightly younger contemporary of Dylan Thomas began to be recognized as one of America's finest poets at about the time of Thomas's death. Robert Lowell came from a family in New England which ancestrally had been involved with what was called the New England Renaissance of the 19th century. From his early years, he was afflicted with recurring bouts of mental disorder, manic attacks over which he had little control, which left him, as he put it, tamed and tranquilized, but which increasingly became both part of his creative energy and to some extent his subject matter, right up to his death in 1977. Lowell's breakthrough into poems which drew on his New England family, his own life, and which quietly and intimately come to terms with his own disturbance, can be seen in the publication of his book, Life Studies, in 1959, in which he faced the experience directly in a way that's been called confessional, as in a poem called Skunk Hour, in which a small New England town becomes almost a vision of hell.
Nautilus Island's hermit heiress still lives through winter in her Spartan cottage. Her sheep still graze above the sea. Her son's a bishop. Her farmer is first selectman in our village. She's in her dotage, thirsting for the hierarchic privacy of Queen Victoria's century. She buys up all the eyesores facing her shore and lets them fall. The season's ill. We've lost our summer millionaire who seemed to leap from an L.L. Bean catalog. His 9-knot yawl was auctioned off to lobstermen. A red fox stain covers Blue Hill. And now our fairy decorator brightens his shop for fall. His fishnets filled with orange cork. Orange, his cobbler's bench and all. There is no money in his work. He'd rather marry. One dark night, my Tudor Ford climbed the hill's skull. I watched for love cars. Lights turned down, they lay together hull to hull where the graveyard shelves on the town. My mind's not right. A car radio bleats, love, oh careless love. I hear my ill spirit sob in each blunt cell as if my hand were at its throat. I myself am hell. Nobody's here. Only skunks that search in the moonlight for a bite to eat. They march on their soles up Main Street, white stripes, moon-struck eyes, red fire under the chalk-dry and sparse spire of the Trinitarian Church. I stand on top of our back steps and breathe the rich air. Mother Skunk with a column of kittens swills the garbage pail. She jabs her wedge head in a cup of sour cream, drops her ostrich tail, and will not scare.
But Lowell was not only just a personal and self-obsessed poet. Marvelously skillful though he was with his self-obsessions, he could see his own disturbances as the reflections of something bigger in the history of the present day, in the sufferings which are part of the fabric of politics and society. In his poem For the Union Dead, he takes his title from a war memorial, many of which were put up after the American Civil War. In this case, the monument in Boston, which commemorates the black infantrymen who fought on the Northern or Union side under the command of their white officer, Colonel Shaw. Lowell can see before his eyes the Boston of his childhood changing, the earth-moving machines literally creating a new world, a world of money and opportunism, in which the old ideals are cynically disregarded.
The old South Boston Aquarium stands in a Sahara of snow now. Its broken windows are boarded. The bronze weather-vane cod has lost half its scales. The airy tanks are dry. Once, my nose crawled like a snail on the glass. My hand tingled to burst the bubbles drifting from the noses of the cowed, compliant fish. My hand draws back. I often sigh still for the dark, downward and vegetating kingdom of the fish and reptile. One morning last March, I pressed against the new barbed and galvanized fence on the Boston Common. Behind their cage, yellow dinosaur steam shovels were grunting as they cropped up tons of mush and grass to gouge their underworld garage. Parking spaces luxuriate like civic sand piles in the heart of Boston. A girdle of orange, Puritan, pumpkin-colored girders braces the tingling State House, shaking over the excavations as it faces Colonel Shaw and his bell-cheeked Negro infantry on St. Gaudens' shaking Civil War relief, propped by a plank splint against the garage's earthquake. 2 months after marching through Boston, half the regiment was dead. At the dedication, William James could almost hear the bronze Negroes breathe. Their monument sticks like a fishbone in the city's throat. Its colonel is as lean as a compass needle. He has an angry, wren-like vigilance, a greyhound's gentle tautness. He seems to wince at pleasure and suffocate for privacy. He's out of bounds now. He rejoices in man's lovely, peculiar power to choose life and die. When he leads his black soldiers to death, he cannot bend his back. On 1,000 small-town New England greens, the old white churches hold their air of sparse, sincere rebellion. Frayed flags quilt the graveyards of the Grand Army of the Republic. The stone statues of the abstract Union soldier grow slimmer and younger each year. Wasp-waisted, they doze over muskets and muse through their sideburns. Shaw's father wanted no monument except the ditch, where his son's body was thrown and lost with his niggers. The ditch is nearer. There are no statues for the last war here. On Boylston Street, a commercial photograph shows Hiroshima boiling over a Mosler safe, the rock of ages that survived the blast. Space is nearer. When I crouch to my television set, the drained faces of Negro school children rise like balloons. Colonel Shaw is riding on his bubble. He waits for the blessed break. The aquarium is gone. Everywhere, giant finned cars nose forward like fish. A savage servility slides by on Greece.
Lowell's troubled, unresolved nostalgia for something that is passing and maybe has already gone forever can be seen in a different form in another famous poem of our own time by one of the best living English poets, Church Going by Philip Larkin. Just as Lowell's For the Union Dead is partly a meditation on the death of political idealism, so Larkin's Church Going is a meditation on the death of religious faith. Like Lowell's poem, Larkin's is full of sharp and specific details, so that it grows out of a whole cluster of particularities. A real place at a real time, here an empty church into which an unbelieving visitor steps casually and a bit warily.
Once I am sure there's nothing going on, I step inside, letting the door thud shut. Another church. Matting, seats and stone, and little books, sprawlings of flowers cut for Sunday, brownish now. Some brass and stuff up at the holy end, small, neat organ, and a tense, musty, unignorable silence. Brewed God knows how long. Hatless, I take off my cycle clips in awkward reverence, move forward, run my hand around the font. From where I stand, the roof looks almost new, cleaned or restored. Someone would know. I don't. Mounting the lectern, I peruse a few hectoring large-scale verses and pronounce, "Here endeth," much more loudly than I'd meant. The echoes snigger briefly. Back at the door, I sign the book, donate an Irish sixpence, reflect the place was not worth stopping for. Yet stop I did. In fact, I often do, and always end much at a loss like this, wondering what to look for. Wondering, too, when churches fall completely out of use, what we shall turn them into. If we shall keep a few cathedrals chronically on show, their parchment plate and pyx in locked cases, and let the rest rent-free to rain and sheep. Shall we avoid them as unlucky places? Or after dark, will dubious women come to make their children touch a particular stone? Pick simples for a cancer, or on some advised night see walking a dead one? Power of some sort or other will go on in games, in riddles, seemingly at random, but superstition, like belief, must die. And what remains when disbelief has gone? Grass, weedy pavement, brambles, buttress, sky. A shape less recognizable each week, a purpose more obscure. I wonder who will be the last, the very last, to seek this place for what it was. One of the crew that tap and jot and know what rude lofts were. Some ruin bibber, randy for antique, or Christmas addict, counting on a whiff of gown and band and organ pipes and myrrh. Or will he be my representative? Bored, uninformed, knowing the ghostly silt dispersed, yet tending to this cross of ground through suburb scrub, because it held unspilt so long and equably what since is found only in separation, marriage and birth and death, and thoughts of these, for which was built this special shell. For though I've no idea what this accoutred, frowsty barn is worth, it pleases me to stand in silence here. A serious house, on serious earth it is, in whose blent air all our compulsions meet, are recognized and robed as destinies. And that much never can be obsolete. Since someone will forever be surprising a hunger in himself to be more serious, and gravitating with it to this ground, which he once heard was proper to grow wise in. If only that so many dead lie round.
As we've seen throughout this series, poets can summon up an incident, a story, if you like, in a way that's much more condensed, more economical and more vivid than a novelist or short story writer. In another poem, Larkin imagines a particular moment, a particular time in the recent past, perhaps in the 1920s, which in only 25 lines he fixes forever. A moment of life and death, and life in death. It is called The Explosion.
On the day of the explosion, shadows pointed towards the pit head. In the sun, the slag heap slept. Down the lane came men in pit boots, coughing oath-edged talk and pipe smoke, shouldering off the freshened silence. One chased after rabbits, lost them, came back with a nest of lark's eggs, showed them, lodged them in the grasses. So they passed in beards and moleskins, fathers, brothers, nicknames, laughter, through the tall gate standing open. At noon there came a tremor. Cows stopped chewing for a second. Sun, scarfed as in a heat haze, dimmed. The dead go on before us. They are sitting in God's house in comfort. We shall see them face to face. Plain as lettering in the chapels, it was said. And for a second, wives saw men of the explosion, larger than in life they managed, gold as on a coin, or walking somehow from the sun towards them. One showing the eggs unbroken.
A word that's hardly been used in the whole of this series is the word inspiration. Yet it's a word that many people would automatically associate with poetry and poets. The mysterious force that's supposed to come to a poet, the undefinable thing that starts him off. And it's because it is mysterious and undefinable that we've avoided using it. But the way in which a poem comes to a poet, the way in which, to use an old-fashioned phrase, the poet is visited by the muse, is the very subject of a poem by another living English poet, Ted Hughes. In The Thought Fox, Ted Hughes captures in the image of a fox the power of creation, the moment of resolution that arrives with the making of a poem. I imagine this midnight moment's forest. Something else is alive beside the clock's loneliness and this blank page where my fingers move. Through the window I see no star. Something more near, though deeper within darkness, is entering the loneliness. Cold, delicately as the dark snow, the fox's nose touches twig, leaf. Two eyes serve a movement that now, and again now, and now, and now, sets neat prints into the snow between trees, and warily a lame shadow lags by stump and in hollow of a body that is bold to come across clearings, an eye, a widening, deepening greenness, brilliantly, concentratedly coming about its own business, till, with a sudden sharp, hot stink of fox, it enters the dark hole of the head. The window is starless still. The clock ticks. The page is printed.